Salvete discipuli, hello 8th grade, and again, my apologies for the glitchy video. Again, I'll try to make myself small so you don't need to look at my face that much. Today we're going to be going over the stage 11 grammar. So these are question words and verbs that take the dative. So, oh my gosh, this is so annoying. I don't know why it's been doing this. So we have question words and verbs that take the dative. So a lot of this, the verbs part is going to be kind of sort of review, but we'll just talk about a couple of little interesting things that happen with specific verbs that like the dative case. And then some of these question words are going to be review as well, with just a couple kind of like new things for question words that we're going to start seeing. Let's jump into it. We've got question words in Latin. So here's a few of the question words that we've already learned in Latin. We have quis, which is how we ask who. We have quid, which is what. We have ubi, meaning where. And then we have cur, meaning why. So these are some of the question words we've been seeing throughout the chapters we've been reading. You should be fairly familiar with these by now. We've seen them quite a bit. So these are question words where we'll see them at the beginning of a sentence or of a clause. And again, questions will end in a question mark in Latin, so that's nice. But these are how we ask questions. So who are you? Right? Quis es. Who are you? Or who is that man over there? Things like that. What are you doing? What are you carrying? What are you writing? Those kinds of questions. Where is the farmer? I don't know. So those kinds of questions that we've been seeing. So these are the words that will introduce those kinds of questions. Now, for this chapter, we're kind of introduced to a couple of ways that we ask yes or no questions. And this is where things get a little interesting. So first of all, we have this thing called enclitics. Enclitics are a word or a bit of a word that is placed at the end of another word. So it's kind of similar to how we do like, instead of having like do not, we have like don't, so like our contractions. So kind of similar to that, that it's like, and it's kind of added on or combined. And this is important because we have this in enclitic ne. So this is not a word on its own in Latin. It's just added to the end of a word, and it functions as a question mark. And it's typically used if you're asking a yes or no question in that sort of a sense. But basically, it just functions as a question mark in addition to the question mark that we will have at the end of our sentence. And it will be at the end of the first word in a sentence. So if it's just a way of, before you get to the end of the sentence, of knowing that this is going to be a question and you need to translate it in that way. So it's just kind of your clue. So this ne at the end of the first word in a sentence will clue you in that this is going to be a question. So typically it's going to be a yes-no question. So we have, for example, vos ne estis contenti. So we have vos, meaning y'all. This is our new pronoun we saw last chapter. Estis, our verb to be for y'all are. And contenti, satisfied, contentus, or content, right? So if we didn't have the ne, and we just had vos estis contenti, just a period, it would be y'all are content. Or you all are content. But with the ne, that's telling us it's asking question, vos ne estis contenti, that's asking, are y'all content, or are you all satisfied? In that sort of a sentence. So that's all that it does, is it just clues you in that the sentence is going to be a question. So making sure you translate it that way. So are you satisfied? All right, and then kind of going along with this, we have a couple of other question words that we're going to go over. So the first one is num, and I think we've seen this one in our passage, one of our passages from last chapter. So num is used to ask a question where you are expecting the answer to be no. So it's a yes-no question where you're expecting the answer is going to be no. So one of the easiest ways of translating this is surely not. So for example, num quintus timet. So asking this, you want to go, surely Quintus is not afraid. So this would be expecting you to answer, no, Quintus, of course he's not afraid, right? No, of course not. So surely Quintus is not afraid. So again, surely not is kind of the easiest way to translate this, but any way you can translate it where you're kind of anticipating that the answer is going to be no. This is showing you another example of how you can translate this. We have num tu Marcus faves. You don't support Marcus, do you? And again, the way you ask that question shows that you're kind of expecting the answer to be no, right? You don't support Marcus, do you? No, of course not. Of course I don't support Marcus. So that's what's going on here. It's asking a question where you're expecting the answer to be no. So again, this will typically be at the beginning of the sentence or clause. And again, surely not is kind of the easiest way to start for translating, but whatever either of these ways works. Again, you're just wanting to get that sense that you are expecting the answer to be no. And then the flip side of that is none. So none is the opposite of num. It's used to ask a question where you're expecting the answer to be yes. So the opposite of num. So none is used to when you're expecting the answer to be yes. So this one is just instead of surely not, you can just translate it as surely or something, right? Where you're expecting, yeah, of course. So for example, nonne gladiatore spectabatis. Surely you are watching the gladiators, or you are watching the gladiators, right? Yes, of course I was watching the gladiators. Weren't we all? Right? So that's, again, you're kind of asking a question where you're expecting the answer to be yes. Here's some more practice. Okay. Some additional practice. Cur tu in horto laboras. So this is practicing all of our question words. So why are you working in the garden, right? Simple question. Why word. Quis est atleta ille? So quis, this is our question word. Who? So who is that athlete? Then we have tu discum habes. So this is showing you how you don't necessarily need a question word or like the enclitic ne to ask a question. You can just put a question mark at the end, and it's just restating the sentence as a question. So if this ended in a period, tu discum habes, it would mean you have a discus. But with the question mark, it's just adjusting how we translate it, in reforming the sentence as a question. So, do you have a discus? And then, vosne estis irati. Here we have that enclitic ne. So again, this is typically how we're going to just do the yes or no question versus just kind of leaving it like this, but you can just do it like this with the question mark at the end. But the ne at the beginning just clues you in faster. So vosne estis irati. So again, this is just telling you it's a question. So you want to kind of start as like, are you or do you or something like that. So estis, are y'all angry? Question there. Ubi sunt mercatores. Ubi is another one of our question words. So where are the merchants? Quid quaeris domina? Quid meaning what. So what do you seek, or what are you looking for? Master, but it's the feminine master. So like lady. Mistress, but like in this female master sense. Tu ne Pompeianus es. So ne again, asking a question, just a yes, no question. Are you a Pompeian? Question, and it could be yes or no. Quis vinum portat? Quis, again, that who is carrying the wine? And then kenam paras. And again, this one is just showing you how you can just rephrase the sentence as a question. Are you preparing dinner? And then we have our num here. Num kenam paras. Again, same question, but this time we're expecting it to be a no answer. You're not preparing dinner, are you? Or surely you're not preparing dinner. And this chapter technically only gives us num, so I think we're only really going to be seeing num in this chapter, not so much nonne, but I wanted to give them both to you so you know that they both do exist. So surely you're not preparing dinner, meaning No, I'm not. Why would I be preparing dinner? It's lunchtime. I don't know. All right. So those are question words. Again, just kind of make sure you're familiar with the ones that we've been seeing. And then this new enclitic ne, again, it's just acting as a question mark. And then num is expecting a no answer. So those are kind of the two real new ones. And then none is expecting a yes answer. But again, I don't really think you're going to see that much in this chapter. All right, and then the last thing, really quick, this is some more review because we're doing a little bit more with the dative case in this chapter. So dative case review, as a reminder, dative case is used for indirect objects. We're going to translate nouns that are in the dative case as to or for the noun, right? You're doing something for someone, you're giving something to someone in the dative case, that sort of a sense. Our dative endings, we have our first declension endings. In the dative singular is ae and is. So like puella is puellai or puellis in the plural. For our second declension nouns, we have a long o and is. I don't know what happened with the formatting there. So like servus would become servo and servis, so to the slave or to the slaves. And then our third declension nouns will end in e or ibus in the dative. So like mercatori, right, to the merchant, or mercatoribus, to the merchants, plural. All right. So these are our dative endings. Again, there's some repetitions happening here. But this is kind of the new one, or not really new, but adding on to things we've done in the past. When we learn the dative case, we learn that there are specific verbs that will kind of inherently sort of take an indirect object, like our verb of giving, right? You typically give something to someone. So in Latin, you're going to have that dative indirect object going with the verb to give, or to hand over, or to show, right? You show something to someone, you hand something over to someone. Those kinds of verbs can take an indirect object. Now, these are examples of ones we've learned. So mercator metellai togam tradidit. So tradidit was one from, was it stage 9? We did dative case. Tradidit, hand over. So the merchant handed over the toga to Metella in the dative case. So you hand something over to someone in the dative. So toga is your direct object receiving the action of this, but then Metella is the to Metella. And then another one that we saw in the previous chapters is prepare. You can prepare something for someone. So grumio hospitibus cenam parabat. So grumio was preparing dinner, the direct object, for the guests, indirect object in the dative case. Okay. So those are examples of verbs that we've seen taking an indirect object and being used with the dative case. Now, there are a couple of verbs that are used with that take a dative case, and it's a slightly different sense because we don't typically translate it in the same way. So, for example, credo, credere, credidi, creditus. This is our verb to trust or to believe, and this is where grammatically the sense of it is very specific in Latin, but how we translate it isn't always obvious that it's that dative sense. So nos pistori credimus. So instead of taking an accusative direct object, it takes a dative direct object in how we kind of in English we think of it. But the reason it takes a dative is because the inherent sense of the verb itself. So we believe the baker is how in English, we trust the baker. We trust the baker is how we would translate in English. So we trust the baker. Baker in English sounds like our direct object. So you would want baker to be in an accusative case is how you would normally think of that. But in Latin, the actual sense of this verb is you give your trust to someone. So that's why the direct object in this case, going along with this verb, is actually going to be in the dative. This is a little weird. This is how a lot of languages do this. There's a couple of things that do this. So we give our trust to someone, but when we translate it, we're typically just going to say we trust someone. But this is just one where you have to keep in mind the whole give our trust to, and that's why the direct object is in the dative case, is because it has that indirect object sense going along with the verb. So this is going to be this is a little weird because, again, in English, we trust the baker. Baker is a direct object. We'd want to do, oh, it's accusative, direct object. But because the inherent sense is you give your trust to someone, the direct object is going to actually be dative. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. There's a few other verbs that do this. So we have this verb faveo, favere, favi, fautum, which is to support or favor. And kind of a similar thing here, Quintus Halconio fawet. So Quintus gives support to Halconius, or Quintus supports Halconius. So this is another one where in English we're typically going to translate it as Quintus supports someone, which we would think, oh, you're supporting someone, that's a direct object. But again, in Latin, technically, the sense is you're giving support to someone. So that's why you have that sort of dative direct object in that sense. And then another one, placeo, placere, placui, placitus, are verb to please. Same thing. Mihi placet, it is pleasing to me, or it pleases me. So this is another one. This is how we say in Latin, like if you like something, right? Oh, I like this. It's literally you're saying this is pleasing to me. And again, dative to or for. That's why even though in English it's not really an indirect object sense, in Latin it is. So you're going to use the dative. So with these three verbs especially, you're going to see a dative noun kind of in the place of an accusative direct object noun, versus with our verbs that we saw previously, like do, dare, dedidatus, our verb to give or like to hand over, to show. In those ones, you're going to see an accusative direct object and a dative indirect object. I give something to someone. These three verbs, the difference is their direct object is going to be that dative with a more indirect object sense because of how the verb functions. That may all be very confusing. We'll see some examples of this in our readings as we continue. But basically, just kind of keep these three verbs in mind and realize that you're going to be seeing them with dative nouns, not with accusative nouns. So that's kind of the main piece there. All right. That is all I have for you guys for grammar this week. Sorry if this video is a little long, but that's what I've got. So question words, again, just a couple new question words, and then just kind of this different way of thinking about a couple of verbs that take a dative direct object. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Check out the Stage 11 model sentences. So that's part of your assignment for this week. So make sure you do those. They're on Google Classroom. And then study your vocabulary, and then you're going to be reading the Stage 10 culture reading and answering questions about that. So those are your assignments for this week. Let me know if you need any help with anything, if you have any questions. Again, apologies for the my glitchy face down here. But I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you all in the next video. Wale te discipuli.